Hello, my name is Natasha and I am a student at Liberty University, and I'm taking a class which we're doing a project called Interpersonal Communication Project, and now I'm just going to do my lecture for this project. I'm using the PowerPoint to guide myself through. So the first PowerPoint is the introduction that just has my name and the name of the project. So let's move to the second slide. Okay, introduction. What is interpersonal communication? Basically, it's exactly what it says it is. Communicating on a personal level. Basically, it can happen between families, friends, during an argument, in a business sort of setting, classroom, online, on the phone, or even at a party. And some of the things that it wouldn't happen with like a bank teller or in an impersonal relationship like that. And all that information is found in Stewart pages 31 through 32. This presentation is basically about my life's journey, about my journey to improving my interpersonal communication. And the goal is to teach you, the listener, and me as well, more about my interpersonal communication journey, and also to jumpstart the journey for myself. Let's move to the next slide. The overarching goal for interpersonal communication. In other words, it's a master goal, and my goal, my overarching goal, is to listen better. Basically, listening better will help me understand better, and in response to that will help me respond better to situations that I'm in when I'm communicating with other people on a personal level. And in turn, that's going to help myself in future relationships and also in my future career as a counselor. So the next thing we're going to talk about is Peterson's book, Why Don't We Listen Better? Communicating and Connecting in Relationships. Let's move to the next slide. Peterson uses an example in his book that explains what a talker is and basically what versus what a listener is. Here's what he says. The talker, their goals are to share feelings, to share thoughts, and they're supposed to do this without accusing, attacking, labeling, and or judging. In contrast, the listener is to provide safety, to understand, and to clarify, without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, and or defending. Let's move to the next slide. A little bit about me, or my identity. Stewart says that an identity or self is made up of interlocking features that mark how we behave and respond to others. Identities are constellations of labels that establish social expectations that we have ourselves and others. And that's on page 84. Basically, I grew up as an only child, and I spent a lot of time talking to myself for the most part. You know, I didn't have anyone else to talk to. So, and not to make it sound like I was lonely, but that's typically what an only child does. And I tended to always want to fit in and to always want to be liked in groups. So that brings me to my behavioral blend, which came up as me being an S personality type. And our personalities are kind, humble, loyal, loving, sincere, compassionate, and those are all positives. But the negative to it is we tend to be somewhat of a pushover. So that's not a very good thing. And I've noticed that in my life, and I've done it in the past, but I'm doing better at it. I'm not doing it as much as I used to. How do these things influence my conversation? That's exactly what I just said. Those personality types that I just described, I'm genuinely a kind person from what I hear. But when it comes to like conflictual things and disagreements, I tend to run away and avoid the conflict, or I'm the first one to back down because I'd rather avoid it than have someone upset with me. My spiritual influences. I use the scripture, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." That comes from King James, Matthew 5:16. I think this influences me because it forces me to keep in mind I want to let people see the good in me and not see something bad. So I try to portray the best person that I can be. Let's see. Let's move to the next slide. Selective listening or potential barriers. Selective listening would be one for me. Burley Allen says that listening is a highly selective, subjective experience. Information that conflicts with the listeners presents ideas and beliefs may simply be tuned out. When we expect to hear certain things, we don't listen to what is really said. Another one is message versus meta-message, and that's from Stewart. And let's see what Stewart says. Stewart says that the message is the meaning of the words and sentences spoken, but the meta-message is the meaning that is not said, at least not in so many words, but that we glean in from every aspect of context. The way something is said, who is saying it, or the fact that it is said at all is a part of a potential barrier. Another from Stewart is dealing with deception, and he says the reality and even the perception of deception can profoundly affect interpersonal relationships. That's another barrier. And then Burley Allen also talks about perception, which is a barrier because our perception about a person, per Burley Allen, our perception about a person, a situation, or a subject can influence our reception and how much we will pay attention. And this is a really important aspect to paying attention, is a really important aspect to communication. So it's definitely a potential barrier. And let's move to the next slide. Internal and external solution for distractions. Examples of distractions that are internal are things that people do to prevent them from listening. An example would be thinking about personal finances while you're supposed to be listening to the person who is talking. Another one for external, a few for external distractions would be clock watching, loud noises, speaking in a monotone, and chewing gum. Now we all know the monotone thing is a little bit, distracting. It's hard to pay attention when someone is talking that way. So the solution would be to basically listen to myself. Burley Allen in his book says people don't realize the power they have over their own behavior. And basically, if I listen to myself, then I'll be able to point out when I'm hearing these things and point out when I'm acting like I'm not listening. And that way I can, at least tell when I need to pay attention more. Let's move to the next slide. Improving interpersonal communication skills. My plan of action. My plan of action is basically to start with what Peterson said, the talker versus the listener, which we explained in the third slide. I would also practice listening with empathy, which is something that Burley Allen talks about in the entire book. And I would also, the most important aspect is to take tips from the best listener there is. This is God. The Lord is an exceptional listener. And he's so good of a listener that he doesn't even have to respond for us to know that he's listening to us. So we should all take some tips from him. The next slide has my references for this project. Thank you all for listening to my project. I hope you've learned a little bit about yourself and learned a little bit more about interpersonal communication and what it is. I know I definitely have throughout this whole entire project. So thank you. Bye-bye.